Here is a video about process writing or the pattern of process. And for a short, fun example, we might imagine turning a pumpkin into a jack-o'-lantern. So you can think about that for a moment, and then I will put on the screen an example of how you might do it. I know there are various ways, but with the example that I'm going to share in a moment, we can practice the various techniques or characteristics of process writing. So let us share this screen. Okay, there it is. So turning a pumpkin into a jack-o'-lantern, most people end up with about 6 steps, and they could have sub-steps also. That's one of the things you consider. I would start with select pumpkin, and I like the word select because it implies that you're thinking ahead. You're choosing the size, the shape of the pumpkin that might go with the design you're planning. Step 2, I would say something about preparation, like get the tools together or lay down some old newspapers or whatever papers people have these days to guard against a mess and get things set, prepared. So that could be some sub steps there, like worksite could be prepare for the mess, get your tools ready. You could also say a little bit about the tools in this step. Number 3 is probably drawing the design. You can use a pen marker to draw it. And then step 4, this could be 2 steps, but I'm going to count it as 1, cutting the top and scooping out the pulp. So you're going to do that, and then you probably don't need to say it, but you'd be putting the pulp on the side somewhere. I always think you don't need every little obvious step when you're doing process writing. Just get the main important things down. Of course, carving the design, that's the main thing we want to do here. And then I might end it with placing the candle, but it'll be up to you how you would want to end this. There's no right or wrong answers. So let's say a little bit about that. So for one thing, explanations or advice, which are handy in process writing. Do you want to give a little history about jack-o'-lanterns? I looked it up, and apparently it started in Ireland, and they used potatoes there. Pumpkins are a New World fruit, so we adapted it, and Irish Americans, Victorian times, started carving pumpkins, and that became how we do it today. Kind of fun history. Could include a little of that. Cautions for families might make sense. If there's children involved, then make sure there are adults to supervise the knives. And speaking of knives, carving techniques or maybe what type of tools might be useful. If anyone's done this recently, it's pretty difficult. The skin of the pumpkin is very thick, so you need special carving knives or just thick, strong knives to do it. It's, you feel like, man, this thing's tough. So that's something. Oh, and one thing I remember a student mentioned this in a class once. When you're cutting the top, usually you start with the top so you can scoop out the pulp. If you cut at a slight angle, then you'll be able to replace the top and it'll sit back where it was. If you cut straight down, then the top will fall through and you can't replace the top. So something like that. Again, there's more here. We don't have to go through all of it, but the type of things you could consider when you're doing process writing. And then starting and ending is something people wonder. So I would start with select pumpkin. I don't think you need to say drive to the Safeway, right? That's obvious enough. And as far as ending, so I was ending with placing the candle. You could just say ending with like Happy Halloween or something like that. It only lasts a couple of days after you carve it. So perhaps you would end with put the decomposing pumpkin into the compost bin. So that would be up to you. And I think I covered most of the characteristics of process. Oh, I would note here, I use numbers for the steps 1 through 6. You could do A, B, C, D, E. That might look a little funny in this case. So I thought the numbers were good. And naming the steps is also something. These are kind of the names of the steps. So I think that will do it. So a fun example for how you might compose and the questions you might ask as you're doing process writing.